Emma stared at the eviction notice clutched in her trembling hands, the words blurring through her tears. 24 years old, working 3 jobs, and still unable to keep her family's small apartment. Her mother's medical bills had drained every savings account, every hope of financial stability. The oncologist's latest report sat on their kitchen table like a death sentence, not just for her mother, but for their entire family's future. The city's neon lights reflected off the rain-soaked windows of the coffee shop where she worked her evening shift, each droplet seeming to mirror her falling tears. Emma had already sold everything of value, her grandmother's jewelry, her college textbooks, even her laptop. The landlord had been patient, but his patience was running out. Tomorrow, they would be homeless. That's when she saw the advertisement in the newspaper a customer had left behind. Seeking marriage partner for business arrangement, generous compensation provided, discretion assured. The phone number belonged to Cross Industries, a name that made headlines in financial newspapers. Emma's heart raced as she realized this could be her family's salvation. Against every instinct screaming danger, she found herself dialing the number with shaking fingers. The secretary who answered was professional, almost clinical. Mr. Cross requires a wife for social and business purposes. 1-year contract renewable. Compensation includes housing, healthcare, and a substantial monthly allowance. Emma's hands shook as she agreed to the interview, knowing she was about to sign away her freedom for her family's survival. She had no idea she was about to enter a world that would change everything she thought she knew about love, sacrifice, and the price of desperation. Alexander Cross was nothing like Emma had imagined. At 32, he possessed an intimidating presence that filled his corner office on the 60th floor. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his grey eyes sharp and calculating behind expensive glasses. He studied her application with the same intensity he might review a corporate merger, his expression unreadable behind his tailored suit. The office itself was a testament to his success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, awards and accolades lining the walls, and a desk that probably cost more than Emma's annual salary. She felt small and out of place in her best dress, which suddenly seemed shabby in comparison to the luxury surrounding her. "Miss Thompson," his voice was deep, controlled, carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Your background check shows you're reliable, educated, and desperate. Those are exactly the qualities I need." His bluntness should have offended her, but Emma found herself oddly relieved by his honesty. No pretense, no false romance, just a business transaction. He slid a thick contract across the mahogany desk. "You'll attend social functions, maintain the appearance of a devoted wife, and ask no questions about my business. In return, your family's debts will be cleared, and you'll receive $50,000 monthly." Emma's breath caught. It was more money than she'd seen in 5 years of her current jobs. "There's one condition," Alexander continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "This remains strictly professional. We share living space, but maintain separate bedrooms. Physical intimacy is not part of this arrangement." Emma nodded, signing her name with a hand that barely trembled. She had no idea she was about to marry a man hiding as much pain as she was. The wedding preparations were a whirlwind of luxury Emma had never experienced. Alexander's assistant, Margaret, guided her through designer dress fittings, makeup consultations, and etiquette lessons with military precision. "Mr. Cross expects perfection," Margaret reminded her constantly, adjusting Emma's posture and correcting her pronunciation of various business associates' names. Emma felt like a doll being dressed for display. The wedding dress cost more than her family's rent for 6 months, its silk fabric flowing like liquid moonlight. She stood before the mirror in the boutique, barely recognizing herself. The woman staring back looked elegant, refined, everything she'd never been able to afford to be. But behind her eyes, she could see the fear and uncertainty that no amount of expensive makeup could hide. Alexander appeared only briefly during these preparations, his presence formal and distant. He approved the venue, the menu, the guest list with the same detached efficiency he brought to board meetings. Emma wondered if he felt anything about this arrangement beyond business satisfaction. During one fitting, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Was it regret? Longing? The moment passed too quickly to be sure. The night before the wedding, Emma sat in her modest apartment for the last time. Her mother, weak from chemotherapy but smiling through her pain, held her daughter's hands. "You're saving our family," she whispered. "I'm so proud of your sacrifice." Emma forced a smile, wondering if her mother would still be proud, knowing her daughter was about to marry a stranger for money. She packed her few belongings, leaving behind the life she'd always known for an uncertain future with a man who seemed to have no heart at all. The ceremony took place in an exclusive chapel that screamed old money and tradition. Emma walked down the aisle alone, her heels clicking against marble floors that had witnessed countless society weddings. The guests were Alexander's business associates and social connections, their faces politely interested but emotionally detached. She felt like an actress in a play where she didn't know her lines. Alexander waited at the altar in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his expression unreadable. As Emma approached, she caught something flickering in his grey eyes. Was it nervousness? The possibility that he might be as uncertain as she was gave her a strange comfort. For a moment, he almost looked human beneath his controlled facade. The vows were traditional, empty of personal meaning. Alexander's voice remained steady as he promised to love and honor her, but Emma detected a slight tremor when he slipped the platinum wedding band onto her finger. The ring was beautiful, expensive, and felt like a beautiful shackle. Her own voice wavered as she recited her vows, the words feeling hollow in her mouth. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Alexander's kiss was brief, chaste, performed for the audience. But in that moment, Emma felt something unexpected, a spark of connection, a recognition of shared loneliness that neither had anticipated. His lips were warm, and for just an instant, she felt like she was kissing a man, not a business partner. The reception was elegant, filled with congratulations from people who didn't know the truth. Emma played her role perfectly, smiling and accepting well wishes, while her new husband watched her with those calculating grey eyes. She had no idea that behind his controlled facade, Alexander was questioning everything about this arrangement, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. Alexander's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of Manhattan's most exclusive building. Emma stood in the foyer, overwhelmed by the space that was now supposedly her home. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city, while expensive artwork and furniture created an atmosphere of refined luxury that felt more like a museum than a home. "Your room is down this hall," Alexander said, his voice maintaining the professional distance he'd established. "Margaret stocked the closet with appropriate clothing. My schedule is on the kitchen counter. Memorize it. We have 3 social events this week where your presence is required." He moved through the space with practiced efficiency, pointing out important details like the location of his office and the household staff schedule. Emma nodded, following him through the spacious apartment. Her bedroom was larger than her family's entire apartment, complete with a walk-in closet filled with designer clothing and a bathroom that resembled a luxury spa. It was beautiful, comfortable, and felt like a prison. The bed was enormous, covered in silk sheets that probably cost more than her monthly salary. Alexander paused at the doorway, his hand resting on the frame. "The household staff will handle meals and cleaning. If you need anything, ask Margaret." He was about to leave when Emma's voice stopped him. Alexander. It was the first time she'd used his first name, and something in her tone made him turn. Thank you. For my family, I mean. I know this is just business for you, but it means everything to me. For a moment, his composed mask slipped, revealing something raw and vulnerable. Get some rest, Emma. Tomorrow, your new life begins. He left her alone with her thoughts and the weight of what she'd committed to, neither of them knowing that this first night would be the last time they'd maintain such careful distance. The next few weeks were intensive training in being Mrs. Alexander Cross. Margaret scheduled Emma's days down to the minute. Language lessons, dance classes, lessons in wine appreciation, and briefings on the key players in Alexander's business and social circles. Emma felt like she was studying for the most important exam of her life, one where failure meant losing everything her family needed. Remember, you're not just representing yourself, Margaret reminded her during etiquette lessons. You're representing the Cross name, the Cross fortune, and everything Mr. Cross has built. The pressure was overwhelming. Emma practiced her smile in the mirror, memorized guest lists, and learned to navigate conversations about art, politics, and business with the skill of a diplomat. Alexander maintained his distance during this period, appearing only for brief check-ins or to approve her progress. But Emma began to notice small things, the way he listened intently when she spoke, how his eyes softened when she laughed at something Margaret said. The coffee that appeared on her study desk each morning made exactly the way she liked it. Their first social event was a charity gala for children's hospitals. Emma wore a stunning black evening gown that made her feel like someone else entirely. Alexander's hand rested on her lower back as he guided her through the crowd, and she was surprised by how natural it felt. "You're doing beautifully," he whispered in her ear, and the genuine warmth in his voice made her heart skip. As the evening progressed, Emma found herself actually enjoying the conversations, the elegant atmosphere, and most surprisingly, the way Alexander looked at her with something that almost resembled pride. She was beginning to understand that this arrangement might be more complicated than either of them had anticipated. 3 months into their arrangement, Emma began to notice cracks in Alexander's carefully constructed facade. She discovered him in his study late one night, staring at a photograph of a woman who looked remarkably like her. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same gentle smile. When he noticed her in the doorway, he quickly put the photo away, but not before Emma saw the pain in his eyes. "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. "I was just getting some water." Alexander nodded, but instead of dismissing her as usual, he gestured to the chair across from his desk. For the first time since their wedding, they sat together in comfortable silence, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. "Her name was Sarah," Alexander said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "We were engaged. She died in a car accident 3 years ago." Emma's heart clenched. Suddenly, his coldness made sense. He wasn't heartless. He was protecting himself from being hurt again. "I'm sorry," Emma said, meaning it. She was beautiful. Alexander looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw him as he truly was. Not a powerful businessman, but a man struggling with grief and loneliness. "You remind me of her," he admitted. "That's why I chose you. I thought it would be easier to have someone who looked like her, but meant nothing to me." His honesty was brutal and beautiful at the same time. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, understanding now why he'd been so determined to keep their relationship purely professional. "But it's not easier, is it?" Emma asked gently. Alexander shook his head, and in that moment, something shifted between them. The walls he'd built so carefully began to crumble, and Emma realized she wanted to be the one to help him heal. After that night in the study, the dynamic between Emma and Alexander began to change subtly. He still maintained professional boundaries, but there were moments of genuine connection that neither could ignore. They began having breakfast together, discussing current events and sharing stories from their past. Emma learned that Alexander had built his empire from nothing, driven by a need to prove himself worthy of love. Alexander, in turn, discovered that Emma was far more intelligent and capable than he'd initially realized. She had graduated summa cum laude from college before her family's financial crisis derailed her plans for graduate school. Her insights into his business decisions were surprisingly astute, and he found himself seeking her opinion on matters that had nothing to do with their social obligations. "You could have been anything," Alexander told her one evening as they prepared for another charity event. "Why did you never pursue your dreams?" Emma adjusted his tie, a gesture that had become natural for them both. "Dreams are luxuries I couldn't afford," she replied. "Survival was more important." Alexander caught her hand, holding it against his chest. "What if I told you that you could pursue them now? That money doesn't have to be a barrier anymore?" Emma looked up at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Why would you do that?" she asked. Alexander's thumb traced across her knuckles, and she could feel his heartbeat beneath her palm. "Because I'm starting to realize that this arrangement has become something I never expected," he said quietly. "And I think you feel it too." Emma's heart raced. He was right. Somewhere between the business meetings and social events, she had begun to care for him in ways that had nothing to do with their contract. The moment that changed everything happened at a corporate retreat in the Hamptons. Emma and Alexander were staying in a luxurious beach house, maintaining separate bedrooms as always, but the romantic setting made their growing attraction impossible to ignore. They had been walking along the beach after dinner, the moonlight casting silver paths across the water. "Emma," Alexander said, stopping suddenly, "I need to tell you something." She turned to face him, and the intensity in his eyes made her pulse quicken. "This isn't working the way I planned. I can't keep pretending that what I feel for you is purely professional." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. "Alexander, we agreed," but he cut her off, stepping closer until she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Forget the agreement," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Tell me you haven't felt it too. Tell me you don't wonder what it would be like if this was real." Emma couldn't lie. She had wondered, dreamed about it, even though she tried to suppress those feelings. "I can't tell you that," she whispered, "because it wouldn't be true." Alexander's eyes darkened, and he reached up to cup her face in his hands. "Then let me show you what real feels like." When he kissed her, it was nothing like their chaste wedding kiss. This was passionate, desperate, full of months of suppressed longing. Emma melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "What happens now?" Emma asked, her voice shaky. Alexander rested his forehead against hers, his thumb tracing her bottom lip. "Now we stop pretending," he said, "if you want to." Emma's answer was to kiss him again, sealing their fate and changing their marriage from a contract to something real and beautiful. Block 10. The wedding night. That should have been that night. For the first time since their wedding, Emma and Alexander didn't retreat to separate bedrooms. Instead, they sat on the beach house's private deck, talking until dawn about their fears, their dreams, and the unexpected love that had grown between them. Alexander told her about his childhood, raised by nannies while his parents built their empire, never learning how to trust or love properly. Emma shared her own struggles, the pressure of being her family's caretaker, the guilt of accepting money for marriage, the fear that she wasn't good enough for someone like him. "You're more than good enough," Alexander said fiercely. "You're everything I never knew I needed." As the sun rose over the ocean, Alexander took Emma's hand and led her inside. I want to do this right, he said, his voice tender. I want to make love to my wife, not fulfill a contract obligation. Emma's heart swelled with emotion as she nodded, finally understanding that this was their real wedding night, the one where two people chose each other freely. What followed was beautiful and passionate, a joining of not just bodies but souls. Alexander was gentle, worshipful, treating Emma like she was precious beyond measure. For the first time in her life, Emma felt truly cherished, truly loved. They made love with the desperation of people who had found their missing piece, holding each other as if they might disappear. Afterward, they lay entwined, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. I love you, Alexander whispered against her hair. I didn't plan for it, didn't want it, but I love you more than I ever thought possible. Emma turned in his arms, seeing the truth in his eyes. I love you too, she replied, sealing their declaration with a kiss that tasted like new beginnings and forever promises. Block 11. Facing the truth. Their return to New York brought new challenges. Alexander's business associates and social circle began to notice the change in their relationship, the way they looked at each other, the genuine affection in their interactions, the fact that they could barely keep their hands off each other. Margaret, ever observant, simply smiled and adjusted their schedule to allow for more private time together. But not everyone was pleased with the development. Alexander's business partner, Richard, had been suspicious of the marriage from the beginning. You're getting too attached, he warned during a board meeting. Remember, she's just a contract employee. Don't let emotions cloud your judgment. Alexander's response was swift and decisive. Emma is my wife, he said coldly. And if you ever refer to her as an employee again, you'll find yourself looking for a new job. Richard backed down, but Emma could see the calculating look in his eyes that suggested this wasn't over. The real test came when Alexander's mother, Victoria Cross, arrived unexpectedly for dinner. She was everything Emma had feared, elegant, cold, and immediately suspicious of their relationship. I assume this marriage is temporary, she said over the main course, a business arrangement that will end when it's no longer profitable. Emma felt her cheeks burn, but Alexander's response surprised her. Actually, Mother, I'm planning to ask Emma to renew our vows, this time for love, not business. Victoria's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more. Later, Emma realized that Alexander had just publicly declared his intentions to make their marriage permanent. That night, as they lay in bed together, Emma voiced her fears. What if your mother is right? What if this is just temporary insanity? Alexander turned to face her, his eyes serious. Then we'll be insane together, he said, kissing her softly. I'm not letting you go, Emma. Not now, not ever. Block 12, the new contract. 6 months after that night in the Hamptons, Alexander did something that shocked everyone who knew him. He tore up their original marriage contract. I want to write a new one, he told Emma as they sat in his study, the same room where she'd first learned about his pain. This contract, he said, producing a single sheet of paper, is much simpler. Emma read it through tears of joy. It was a love letter disguised as a legal document, promising partnership, respect, and devotion for as long as they both lived. At the bottom, instead of a signature line, there was a simple question. Will you marry me again, Emma Cross, this time forever? Emma's answer was to kiss him senseless, but she still signed the paper, writing yes, forever, next to her name. They were married again, 3 months later, in a small ceremony attended only by family and close friends. Emma's mother, now in remission thanks to the medical care Alexander had provided, cried tears of joy as she watched her daughter marry for love. This time, when Alexander kissed his bride, it was full of promise and passion. This time, when they danced their first dance, it was to a song they'd chosen together. This time, when they retired to their bedroom, It was as true husband and wife, bound not by contract, but by love. Block 13. Ever after 2 years later, Emma stood in the same penthouse that had once felt like a prison, now truly her home. She was 6 months pregnant with their first child, and Alexander couldn't keep his hands off her growing belly. "She's going to be just as beautiful as her mother," he said, pressing a kiss to Emma's neck. "She?" Emma laughed. "What if it's a boy?" Alexander considered this seriously. "Then he'll be the luckiest boy in the world, because he'll have you as his mother." Emma had returned to school, earning her master's degree in business with Alexander's full support.